right. Welcome, monologuers. It's Tony. You got me monologuing. Oh, I got to make an adjustment there. Let me take that out of studio. Let me make a quick adjustment to my camera. Not that one, not that one, that one. I don't know why it doesn't leave. Whatever reason, it does not leave that when I make that adjustment. So, welcome everybody. You got me monologuing. I'm Tony, and today we are inspired by our friend, Mr. Vince Venturella. We're going to be working on some terrain today. Today is going to be a lot of airbrush work. We have a lot of models in front of us from Marvel Crisis Protocol. Some of them I've had sitting on my bench for months, waiting for me to get around to it, such as this. Ooh, nice big fat piece of terrain that we've got set up on the airbrush. So what we're going to do today is we're gonna talk about primers, different ways to use them. Now, Mr. Vince Venturella on his channel Hobby Cheating talked about the differences between the various primers. I think he got one item a little bit wrong when he talked about rattle cans. He said that there's no difference between a rattle can of say Army Painter or Citadel versus a rattle can of Krylon or Rust-Oleum. I respectfully disagree, but the difference is small. Yes, they are all pretty much the same makeup, same stuff. The difference is the grind of the pigment. Okay, and the reason why you can take you can slip a little bit with a miniature primer versus a Krylon or any other rattle can, the cheap ones that you get, is the pigment is more finely ground in the mini version, which allows for it to settle into finer detail without clogging that detail up. That's the only real difference. I've gotten away from rattle cans. I used rattle cans for years. I used the Armory, which is a cheap miniature brand. They have black, white, and gray. That's it. 3 colors. I've used Citadel in the past, but way expensive. I've used Army Painter in the past. And the only time I'll tell you Army Painter really shines with that is the fact that they've got a color match where if you need their ultramarine blue, their ultramarine blue rattle can is the same color, a dead match for the brush-on paint, which means you can go in and you can use that primer as your base coat and be able to touch it up with their dropper bottle. One of my favorite things to do. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to go over various things that you can do with your primer. I'm going to make an adjustment here because I want you to see more of my table. Let's see here. Can we get a nice wide shot? There we go. That's going to let you see more of the table as I'm working. I need to make one more adjustment here. All right. All right. So I'm showing you more of my table today because we're going to be doing a lot of airbrush work over large surfaces. Normally, and it's one of the reasons why I didn't change out my paper too, because I know I'm going to be spraying the hell out of this. So we got a bunch of minis here, all Marvel Crisis Protocol figures and terrain. So I've got the NYC construction terrain kit that needs to be primed up. That includes, here you've got your cement mixer with the Fisk name on it. You've got 6 barrels, 55-gallon drums, if you will. You've got these construction barriers. You got a little bobcat And you've got the big boy. Boom. Over ever so slightly. I don't know if I've mentioned this lately, but I love my new rig. All right. This bad boy, it's about what, 8 inches long, 10 inches long. Size 4 terrain. It's a nice little building that can be picked up and thrown in the game or have people thrown into it. Had an option to either have the Fisk logo or I opted to go with damage control. We got lots of options here. Let's see what's going on here. All right. So, what I'm going to put out there today, what we're going to work on, are the various ways. Now, I'm not going to be able to get to, I don't have the means to support right now until I get this truck off of there. So, the Chimichanga Mobile and the Bobcat are going to sit off to the side. But I'm going to use the same principles on them as I'm going to use on many of these other items. But we're going to use our primer in different ways. We're going to use a couple of different types of primer. Oh, I'll show you some other things that I'm working on too. So, here are the figures that I'm going to be working on alongside. So we've got Scarlet Witch and her little magic cloud that she will get glued into once this is all done with the airbrush. Okay, so I have a lot of airbrush work I want to do on this, and I don't want her in there as I do it. So she is stuck separately to her own cap for work on later. We've got her brother Quicksilver. Quicksilver we're gonna do in a different color as well. We have Bob, Agent of Hydra, in his chef's hat. He comes with Deadpool, whoosh, and then all of these little pieces. So I am going to do these all in different colors. And we're going to use them as undercoats for various reasons. All right. So for all of these, the cement mixer, the barrels, as well as the construction office, we're going to use Stynylrez metal. All right. So this is their metal primer. This is fantastic for undercoating things like this because what I'm going to end up doing, I may try and do that Bobcat as well. We'll see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to base coat this with metal. Then I'm going to hit it with some AK Interactive worn effects. And what that's going to do, it's going to, once that dries, I can put a top coat on it. And then I can go back over that top coat and with a little bit of water and a toothpick or a stiff bristled brush, I can put some chipping effects. Now, this is not a chipping medium. This is worn effects, which means it's much more subtle than those the ones that do massive amounts of chipping. I don't want it to be. I want it to be more subtle than that on this. I don't want huge chunks coming off. So we're going to start with the metal. Now, in addition, so we're going to do a couple of other things here. So Bob's primary colors, and look at me bumping my stuff here. Bob's primary colors are yellow and green. If I were to put a black primer coat on him, even with a zenithal, that's going to be a pain in the ass to paint. And since he's green and yellow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use neutral. This is another Stynylrez. This is a neutral primer. It comes out a very nice buff color, a nice khaki. I could use white. I could use gray and then zenithal white, but I'm going to use the buff, and then I'll zenithal over that so that I can put some transparent colors over it and have the warmth of the neutral primer come through. So we'll get a nice warm yellow and green. So Deadpool presents an interesting issue. Deadpool I want to prime black with a zenithal, but I've got this rocket effect and this whoosh. And the little Deadpool head right there. Little head pool. This, I don't necessarily want black. Because I want to be able to go in there with reds, yellows, orange inks. And be able to make that look like rocket exhaust. So we're going to have our work cut out. We're definitely going to prime him black. But we're going to come back with the airbrush and we're going to work on all of this down here. To provide with a little bit of a brighter color so that we can put the reds, yellows, and oranges in there. Scarlet Witch. And these. So here in Illinois, these are typically gray, right? For those of us who live in the great state of Illinois, they're made of concrete. These seem to be plastic and filled. And in the state of New York, apparently they use yellow, which is a great time to break out the pink primer. We're going to prime these pink. We're going to hit them with a zenithal of white. We're also going to do the same thing for Scarlet Witch and her magical swirl. We want some darker pinks in there because the plan is once this is done, I'm going to come over the top with some white, pop the white on here, and then I'm going to go over the whole thing with fluorescent pink. And by having that darker, more muted pink underneath with white, it's going to give us some nice little transitions and magical effects there. Airbrush, this is prime airbrush work. This is going to be so choice. The majority of Scarlet Witch is also pink and white, so she too, or pink and red, excuse me. So she too is going to get primed with the pink, and then I'll be going over it with a zenithal and hitting her with reds and pinks. Then lastly, Quicksilver. Quicksilver is going to be the last one I do. His costume is 90, and I keep hitting that. Stand by. There we go. Now maybe I'll hit that less. Maybe. There we go. Yeah, as I was saying, so these are going to get a pink primer with a zenithal highlight because pink and red under yellow is fantastic. You're going to see what that can do. Now I could do the mixer in the pink as well, but I want to chip it up. I want to bring out some metallic underneath it, so I'm going to go with the metal on that. And then because with Quicksilver, his costume is 90% blue, so I'm going to go ahead and just give myself a head start by using a blue primer. So that's what we're doing with everything today. With any luck, if all goes well, I will not only get the priming done on all of these, I will also get the zenithal done and maybe the chipping medium so that we can, because my next goal is to work on weathering of these cityscape pieces. I got some fantastic new products courtesy of our friends at Mini Masterworks, as well as Grognard Games. So we're going to be trying some weathering techniques on all of this. So let's get it on. All right. So let me, you know what I'm going to do? Because I'm going to have a lot of background. Let's find us some pretzel. Let's get some music going here. There we go. All right. No. Apparently pretzel needs to set itself up again. All right. Come on, pretzel, where you at? All right, so with as much airbrushing as I am going to be doing, I am going to be wearing my mask. I do recommend well-ventilated area. If you don't have an airbrush booth and you're going to be airbrushing for more than just a couple of minutes, I absolutely, positively recommend you break out a mask. Alright, it looks like we're just about ready. Pretzel is launched. Give you a little background music. Alright. We're just going to go with some show music today. Alright, so let's start. Now, normally I don't do this, but I am definitely going to be using a lot of primer as we do this. So I am going to be capping it off. Let me grab a glove. All right. This is the metal primer. Let's start here. Now the great thing about Stynylrez is I do not need to thin it. Especially with the metal primer, I would not recommend doing that at all. Alright, so airbrush is loaded. I've got it set to about 30 psi. I've got the nozzle set wide open. Alright, so we can get started with this. Now on these barrels, they do have seams running down the side of them. The detail was so fine, I didn't want to risk sanding off the detail to get rid of the seams. So I'm just imagining that that's the seam, the weld seam for the barrel itself. This should go relatively quickly. And the other great thing about Stynylrez airbrush primer is it is ready super fast to paint on. I let this sit for about 15 minutes or so, and I should be ready for the worn effects without having any detriment to the rest of the piece. Alright. I'm going to go back over this one more time, just very lightly. Make sure that everything's got good coverage. All looks good. I'm not going for full coverage on the first pass, although one of the nice things about Stynylrez primers is I could absolutely go for full coverage on the absolute first pass. This stuff is fantastic. Alright, so they're all primed. I'm going to set these off to the side, and we're going to move on to the big boy. All right. So I'm going to keep it 6 to 8 inches away, and I'm just going to cover it like this. Very slow. And you can see it's not completely covered, right? That's all right for the first pass. I'm not at all concerned about the bottoms. I think I just ran out of primer. Nope, sure didn't. There we go. Now this is not going to be as shiny as your other metals will be, right? It's a primer. It's designed to be a little bit more matte and have a little bit more tooth so that other paints will stick on top of it. This is exactly what this primer is designed for. Now I'm going to finish my coverage. I'm going to make sure that everything has full coverage with my second pass. I do want to make sure I get the underside of that air conditioning unit. All right. That's simple. Let this bad boy sit to the side and cure. And as long as we've still got some primer left in here, which we've got very little, wow. I'm going to try and do this bad boy. Need to find something to stick them to, though. I don't know if I've got anything. Get just a couple more drops back in there. The other great thing about airbrush primer versus any other primer is the cost. You get so much primer in one of these bottles, and you can do so much with it. Okay, there's our little silver. All right, and there we go. That is the first piece done. First color done, I should say. So that was as simple as it gets, right? So I'm going to go ahead. I've got my garbage can here. It's full of paper towels because I go through so damn many paper towels while I'm painting. So I'm able to just clean my airbrush out into my garbage can because I got plenty of absorbency in there. You could also get yourself like a 5-gallon bucket and just have that sit down underneath you to make it easier on you to clean. That's what I prefer. All that'll evaporate. My basement is rather dry, so the moisture will evaporate. All the bad stuff will stay in the garbage can. All the moisture will go up into the air. Yay. All right. This is just a quick between color cleaning. It's really a color rinse. It's not a real cleaning at this point. Clean my cap. I'm not going to need the cap anymore. No, I'm not going to need the cap anymore. So the next color I want to move on to is the pink. So we're going to move on to Scarlet Witch. Her little doohickey and these pieces here. All right. So let's go ahead and get some pink going, shall we? Alright, so I'm going to fill it up about a third of the way. Again, I do not thin my Stynylrez. I know a lot of people say you should. I don't necessarily believe that. I've got a 0.5 millimeter nozzle. And I'm blowing at 25 psi. Probably closer to 30 psi. Again, first passes don't need complete coverage. Thin coats, just like we would do with standard paints, right? Thin coats prevent us from gumming up the works. Okay, let's turn around. Let's go for a second pass. And there's the pink that we're looking for. Nice and vibrant. Now for this terrain, I am nowhere near concerned with mold lines and things of that nature. Especially not on just this little bit of scatter here, right? Okay. Pink primer is down. Done and done. So let's pick up our Scarlet Witch. I'm going to set down my airbrush. We're going to start with her swoopy swoop, whatever you want to call this thing. Her magic. So now I know I'm going to paint the rim of the base with primer anyway, black primer. I just want to make sure I have coverage right out of the gate. Just realizing I'm off screen with a lot of this. Second coating it. That looks pretty tight as it is, but when we're done with that, that is going to be magical. It's going to pop. Right now I'm just making sure that I don't want any of the dark, I don't want any gray to poke through, right? Because I'm going to come at this from above with some white. I don't want it to have gray for that pink to settle on. I want it to have pink, because that pink on top of the pink is going to provide us with some fantastic saturation, and you're going to get so much color out of that. Alright, so I can hear, I don't know if you could hear that, but I could definitely hear that the primer is oh, that's why. I ran out. Just another drop or two. Alright, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Should be plenty. Oh, there was some silver hanging around somewhere in there. And we are blowing mostly air because we're trying to dry this as it lands on the model. So what we don't want is for it to pool up and then start to spiderweb as more air hits it. Alright, that's good enough. Alright. So that's Scarlet Witch down. Okay. Oh, when I rinse out my airbrush, pure distilled water. Never tap water in my airbrush. What I don't want to have happen is have any sort of buildup inside the airbrush. I use a lot of water. Alright, Q-tip. I want to make sure I have... The next color, I definitely don't want any pink infiltrating it, right? Okay. Get some Medea airbrush cleaner. Alright, next color we're going to do buff. We're going to do our Bob, which is why I absolutely don't want any pink in this airbrush. Bob, Agent of Hydra. Shake that up. Just a little bit more than that. About 15 drops or so. Alright, let's go ahead, let's get this started. All right. Thumbs up, Bob. Looking good. Okay. Bob is done. Next up, let's do Pietro. And again, we're doing Quicksilver with blue primer because, well, he's mostly blue. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, that metal is already dry, completely dry. Look at that. That's fantastic. Love it. All right. All right, so we're going to let Scarlet Witch dry. We're going to let Bob dry. I have to fill up my water here in a minute. We're going to grab our blue. Yeah, Pietro. Pietro. You know what the difference between Captain America and Hawkeye is? Captain America has a shield made of vibranium, and Hawkeye has a shield made of Quicksilver. Not sorry. Really not sorry about that. All right, Pietro needs about 15 drops. All right. So we can see right here. It's coming out, nice and blue. Let's do this. Whenever anybody asks me how they can paint faster, the first question I always have is, do you have an airbrush? Because if your answer to that question is no, then that is the easiest answer I can give you. Buy an airbrush. By the time you're into this hobby for 6 months, you should be itching to buy yourself an airbrush. Especially when you have figures like Quicksilver here. This figure is 90% blue. So why should I go, even with contrast paint, this still makes quicker work of it. And I could take contrast paint and throw it over the top of that once I've zenithalled it and get an even better result. Just telling you, man. Airbrushes are your best friend. Now, before, I used to use airbrushes as a model hobbyist for years. But the techniques for model hobbyists versus model hobbying versus mini hobbying, sorry about that, the techniques used are different. So I would say go watch my boy Kenny Boucher when you have the opportunity. Next Level Painting, his work with the airbrush, the best out there. Alright, so last figure. That's going to be Deadpool, and we're painting him, we're priming him black. Let me fill my water here real quick. Take this off for a minute. Grab myself a drink. And refill my water bottle. I always keep a couple of gallons of distilled water on hand so I can refill my bottles. I'd say 95% of my water consumption, my distilled water consumption, is cleaning out my airbrushes. Probably 98%. The other 2% is to make flow aid. And the thing is, in 3 years now, I've only ever gone through, maybe a gallon of water making flow aid. All right, Steino Res Black. This is the color I go through more of because I prime more of my stuff black than anything. Occasionally I'll prime gray fairly often, but not as often as I'm going to prime black. All right. Not that much. That's probably too much, but such is life. Let's grab our hobby handle. Oh no. The sword's trying to break. You see that? Alright, so I need to protect that sword real quick. I don't know what I did, so hairdryer. Alright. The good news is it doesn't feel like it broke. Yet. Alright, there we go. It's got a little bend. It's not a break. There we go. Okay. Alright, so next thing we need to do is we're going to zenithal the figures. So for that, I need my, what's my favorite new white through the airbrush, people? Golden titanium white high flow acrylic. And then I need flow improver. All right. Oh. Let's clean the black out, shall we? So we do. I'm going to take my mask off. Black sticks on the inside of this better than anything else I have. So we need a little bit of airbrush cleaner in there. Q-tip. Now, one thing I don't want to do is spray these chunks through my needle in my airbrush. Most of them will probably go through. It's not a chance that I want to take with this shit getting caught in my nozzle. Alright, there we go. Alright. Now for the zenithal. First thing that goes into the pot, a couple of drops of flow improver. I mean drops, you don't need a lot of it. Golden high flow white. Fill this about a third of the way up. Then we're going to grab our mixing brush. Mix that in there real good. Perfect. Alright, let's start with Deadpool. So for Deadpool, we're going to come straight down over the top. I'm going to put a lot more emphasis on this whoosh and this smoke cloud, however. We want that to be damn near white so that we can work our magic on it later. Deadpool, we want gray. But this, we want to work magic on it later. We don't want that gray. Even head pool there. You see, I put little Wade. And you'll notice the angle that I'm taking. I am shooting straight down over the top of this. I might turn it just a little bit to get like his butt. I want a little bit of color on his butt there. But for the most part, it's straight down. I'm going to let the paint skitter down the front of them to pick up that contrast, right? You get highlights, you get shadows, you get whites all the way down to black. And that's going to help inform our paint job a little bit later. So, whoosh. All right. Once again, working with an explosion on the base, so we're going to hit that a little bit harder with the white. We don't want as much blue to show through that. Now, I know I painted him blue because his costume, uniform, whatever you want to call it, is mostly blue. And now I've dropped a bunch of white over the top of it. Yep, that's exactly what I did. Now when I go back in with a blue over top of this, the blue underneath is going to reinforce that darker blue shadow, but the highlights are going to be able to be picked up. I just realized I'm not wearing my mask. Alright, Scarlet Witch. Now she's going to be a little bit different, mostly because she's going to be lit up by magic from all directions anyway. So I'm going to allow myself some creative freedom on where I'm putting some of these highlights. There we go. We're going to do Bob next. How long have we been at this? an hour. Just an hour. I've got all of this stuff in such a good place. Okay. So take a look at it from underneath. You can see that's still really pink. From straight on, you've got some variation in there, and that's exactly what I want. But I want to do one more thing before we finish this up. And for this particular model, come here. There we go. I'm going to grab my... I'm going to put some of this concrete slab, which is what I use for the bases of all my Marvel Crisis Protocol. I want to put some of this down here first, right? Because once I spray this fluoro pink down, it's going to be almost impossible not to cover back up. Okay. Go ahead and do this on all of them, as long as I got the paint in the cup. All right, that's good there. Fantastic. All right. Let's rinse this one out, and then we're gonna airbrush cleaner in there. Okay. That's done. All right, last thing we're going to do for the moment, we're going to hit these. All of this can now go to the side. We're going to hit these with some white so that we can put some yellow over the top of it. Now the key on this is I want to keep everything at kind of a top-down angle so that we can have some of that pink showing through at the bottom. That is just enough pink showing through. We don't need a lot here. All right, that's good. Believe it or not, that's going to be enough to give us some great depth. All right, so that's all done. All of our zenithal's done. Our ink, our wash is not our wash. Our base coat and zenithals are done on a whole bunch. It took us less than an hour to get all of these figures prepped, which to me is pretty spectacular. All right. Alright, so next step, we're going to let the ink on these things dry. And while we do that, we are going to grab our chipping effects. In this case, it's AK Interactive Worn Effects. Now this, I also have chipping medium, which is much more assertive. Alright, Worn Effects versus chipping medium. Chipping medium, or if you do the hairspray and salt, that is great for leaving huge chunks just coming out, which is good for some things. I want these to be worn, but I want them to be lightly worn. I want to be able to control the weathering and everything else. So we're going to put some Worn Effects on. Now, you apply 2 or 3 coats by airbrush over a painted surface, and immediately after it's dry, we paint a second coat of the final color using any acrylic paint. After that is dry, humidify lightly with a brush, and you can begin to scratch the surface with a brush or a toothpick. So, let's go ahead and now that that's all done, we're going to be using a shit ton of this. So, I'm going to go ahead and shake that up. We are going to fill this bad boy up. All right. Something happened there. Stand by. Oh, I came unplugged. How did that happen? All right. All right. So just as before, ew. The hell? I don't know if that was leftover ink or it was something that was just supposed to be there, but something looked like it was floating in this. Alright. So 2 to 3 coats. Here we go. Nice steady pace. Don't need it nice and, we don't need it thick. We're going to put a couple of coats on this, right? Alright, there's that. Next up, we're going to do our little bobcat here. Okay. And then lastly, alright, where did I put that stuff? Oh. Derp. Alright. That's coat 1. Everything's been nicely coated. Let's hit this with a hairdryer. Alright, so I went on a little bit heavier than I wanted to. Than I should have, I should say. And so it didn't dry as quickly as it should have. So I had to resort to a little bit of Charizard chicanery. Alright. That's coat 1 done. It's actually probably coat 1.5. So we're going to try this one more time. We're going to go super, super light this time. And this should be the last coat that we need. That is literally going to be all we're doing to that. We're going to let that set up. We're going to let it dry. Yeah, screw it. That'll be good. Done. All right. So we're going to let all of that set up. And while it does... water. There's my water. All right. About 5 o'clock, just about that time. All right. Okay. Last thing we're going to do, while we wait on all of that to dry, and break out our yellow. For this particular yellow, I want to go interior yellow, not olive drab. I think we're going to use medium yellow. This is a Vallejo Model Air. It's medium yellow. The number is... where you at? 71.002. The great thing about the Vallejo Model Air and Game Air line, no thinning required. All right. about that much. Okay, push all of that back. Alright, and as you can see here, it's still a pretty transparent color, which is exactly what makes it perfect for what we're doing here. Beautiful. See the tones that you get out of that? By that transparent yellow with the pink underneath? Now the one thing is, I am absolutely going to need to lock this color in before I do any weathering or any other work on these. Because if I don't, this yellow is going to chip right off. Just like that. We have some beautiful, beautiful yellow barricades. And they're 90% done. A little bit of weathering, paint up the lights on the top, and those are complete. All right. All right. All right. So the next episode is going to come Tuesday. I'll be back. And on that stream, I will be doing the weathering effects on the NYC terrain pack. And then we've got many, many figures available for us to paint up at our leisure, all ready to go right out the gate. All right, so airbrush is clean. Waiting on a couple of terrain to dry. So what I'm going to do, I'll probably do it off camera because I might do it a little bit later. I got to go get dinner started here shortly. I am going to put the base coat down. I'm going to be using a white gray on this. Wow. I'm going to be using a yellow on this and this. Probably the same yellow that I just used. I'm going to let them dry naturally. I'm going to give them some time. I think I'm going to go blues and blacks on the barrels. We'll see. Barrels I haven't figured out yet. But next step, we're waiting for all of this stuff to dry. I want to give it a good hour or so, at least, before I do anything more. We're going to hit the barricades with dull coat. I'll probably just use a rattle can for that. And we're going to hit all of the terrain pieces with their base coats so that those can dry. And on on Tuesday, we can start our modeling and chipping effects. So that's where we're at. Any questions? No? Good. Don't want to answer them. I'm kidding. And again, I also have now, I've got 4 minis ready to be painted on top of all of this terrain. The terrain is not going to be super detailed. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. I'm hoping a couple of hours and we'll be able to be done with this on Tuesday. And then we can move into the figures next week. That's where we're at. So, hope you got something out of this. I know it was a kind of short stream. I appreciate those of you who joined me. I'm going to start editing some of this stuff for YouTube, I think, so that we can start throwing stuff on the YouTube, up on the YouTube channel, where you can find us there as well. All right, with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining me tonight. You guys have a great one.